Are you fathers ready to get all of your answers about divorce? Okay, gang, I'm really excited to have you here today. You know why? This is a world first. It's an Ask Andy Anything collaboration video. Well, actually, it's a Zoom video recording of a podcast that I recently did with Michael Rhodes, host from the Rising Phoenix podcast, which is about divorce support for men. And as you know, I have a video series called Divorce, the Beginning of a Beautiful Friendship, which takes fathers step by step from the title of husband and wife to loving co-parents. So today we're going to run through several of the most important questions that most divorced fathers are asking. So I just want to give you a heads up. If my audio sounds tinny and the sound quality is different than Michael's, it was some sort of technical issue going through Zoom that I wasn't aware of while the recording was happening. So hopefully that won't be too distracting for you. And I'm sure you're going to love Michael. He's got a great voice, which made me very self-conscious when I listened back and heard his glorious baritone against my, like I said, tinny sort of nasally recording. So I'd love to get your feedback on this because we plan to do some more collaborations in the future.
Okay, joining me today is Andrew Chase. Andrew is doing a series on his YouTube channel, Ask Andy Anything, about how to have an amicable divorce with your ex. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
So let's jump right into it. Let's get a bit of background on you and why you decided to create the video series that you recently created.
Okay, so I'm going to take you back a little bit because it's really important to have the history of myself and my divorce and how I got to this place. So I'm going to run through this as quickly as I can, but hopefully this will help people in understanding that I basically was in the same place that you are right now, or you have been. There's nothing special about me in that sense. My former wife, we'll just call her Julie for the sake of this. So we met working for the same recruiting firm. There I was in Los Angeles area and she was in San Diego. And at that time, she had a longtime boyfriend. They were close to getting engaged. So we started off as friends. Eventually, I got promoted up to Northern California to open up a branch up there for our company. And while I was up there, Julie, her sister, was working up there. And so she suggested to her sister, Jennifer, to come work in my office because I'd be a really good manager to work for. Eventually, Julie broke up with her boyfriend, and I would see her a lot because she would fly up for her sister's parties up in the Bay Area. And her sister really liked me, so she would get me together with her sister, Julie, as much as possible. We started dating while I was in the Bay Area, and eventually she moved up to San Francisco to live with me, and not long after that, we were engaged. And then on December 26th of 1998, we got married. We had our first child in 2000. We decided we're going to move back to LA because both of our parents were down there and we really needed the family support. And eventually buy a house in Southern California. In 2003, we had our second child, which was a boy. And in 2005, our third child, a girl. Pretty much everything was by the book. White picket fence. In the backyard, had a basketball court, trampoline, a garage where I could do my handyman work, and a home office. And at that time, we had now left the company we met at and started our own company. We had the usual disputes about financial spending and how the kids should be disciplined. And on the surface, we looked like the perfect family. But our vast differences in the way we were brought up continued over the years to bubble up. And eventually, we came to a mutual decision to separate, to get divorced. And to give you a little more color on our backgrounds, I came from a family where divorce was not an option. It was just not something that was ever discussed. This is how it was.
Right.
And my parents were college sweethearts who, after more than 60 years together, still enjoy each other's company and are best friends and dote on each other like they were still in the courtship phase. So I had a real romantic fantasy about what relationships looked like, not knowing growing up that my parents had won the marriage lottery when they had found each other. My former wife, on the other hand's parents had divorced when she was 10 years old, and her dad got primary custody while her mother went back to school to get a college degree, then go on to get a PhD in psychology. She had barely finished high school before getting pregnant with Julie's sister. So when her marriage started at 18, she was just a child and didn't know who she was. If Julie and I hadn't had kids, I would have given our marriage 2 years. The additional 8 years was spent being pregnant or breastfeeding, which basically made it easy for us not to focus on our lack of real emotional connection, which is most likely the reason that just past our youngest finishing up breastfeeding that we realized our differences were just too great and we were staying together for unhealthy reasons. Julie, because she didn't want to be the next person getting divorced in her family, yes, just about everybody in her family had been divorced at least once, and me because I didn't want to be the first person in my family with kids to get divorced. Julie, who had started her master's in spiritual psychology around this time, taught me what she had learned, which helped us both to make the transition from husband and wife to loving co-parents that much easier on ourselves and our children. A few years after we divorced, I got my master's in spiritual psychology as well. And during my second year, when we had to decide on a project to do, I chose writing a book on spiritual divorce for parents, otherwise known as Conscious Uncoupling. I finished the book in 2013, but after discussing with my editor, I decided to rewrite the book with just focusing on divorced fathers, as there weren't books out there written by men for men about amicable divorce. Life took over, and I started and stopped several times over the past 7 years before deciding to just turn the book into a video series. And I currently have 6 episodes out and about 5 to 10 more to go.
You had an idea there. Why switch the video?
I love shooting video and editing video. And I just got interested in YouTube. The title of the channel, as you know, is Ask Andy Anything. And it started off because I like to help people. I had a teaching major in my undergrad, and I've been a coach for several years in soccer and in track. And I've always been somebody that just likes to help people. As a manager, as a recruiter, all these things just came together. And one of the things about the internet and this access that didn't exist back when I was growing up is that I can help people all over the world with just about anything. I'm 53 years old. I've lived all over the world. I've traveled over 50 countries. There's a website called Quora.com where you can ask any question. I started off on that, and I'm one of the most viewed contributors. I answer questions on just about anything. That's where I came with Ask Andy Anything. And it started off where someone would ask me a question on Quora, and then I would answer it on video. And then it came to a point where I really needed to niche down, really need to come up with a focus, because the word's not getting out there if you're too general. Now I am just focused on being a spiritual coach, which I can help out in all different realms, whether it's emotional, spiritual, physical, psychological. And this gave me the idea to finally take that book and turn it into a video series that brings me to where I am today.
Yeah, it's a great series. I got to watch a good bit of it last night. So what are some of the takeaways you want people to take away from those videos?
There's 3 main things. First, and I would say most important, because if the person doesn't agree with me, with my central premise here, then might as well not even watch my videos.
Right.
And that's the understanding that the reason for the success or lack thereof is equal responsibility, equally 50-50 for the relationship and for the divorce. Here's where people get confused on that, and especially men, and I understand, I'm no different, and this didn't happen overnight for me. I've done a lot of work on it, that while one person may have done more outwardly more destructive things in the relationship, understanding that it takes 2 to tango. Let's just say that your former spouse had an affair. And so your community, everyone around you, your family or friends are going to say, hey, screw her. She destroyed your relationship. It's her fault. You may have 10% responsibility. She has 90% because outwardly she did the thing that people in society deem as the evil thing to do. However, women connect differently than men do, are more results driven, and women are more processed. Number one, no one forced you. Well, maybe you had a gun to your head. But for most people, we're not forced to marry the person they married to. So you chose that person for unconscious reasons. Maybe it's because your mother cheated on your father and you subconsciously found a woman that would be like your mother. Of course, you don't even realize you're doing this. So when it comes to things that are beneath the surface, can't really assign blame. There's no such thing as an emotional yardstick, because what causes one person to do something is completely different than the other person. As long as you agree on the central premise that you take equal responsibility, regardless in the physical world, who may have done more things that your friends agree with being the wrong thing.
I 100% agree, and that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because that's the way I view it. If we don't take responsibility, then there's no way for us to move forward, because then you assume that you did nothing wrong and there's nothing for you to fix, and that's just nonsense. We have to take ownership of our faults and failures. So I completely agree with you.
To toot each other's horns, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to be on your show, is because when I listened to your podcast, and one of the first episodes you talked about was the 50-50 thing. And it's rare that I've heard any other men say that. It's one of the reasons I don't talk to too many men about that, because most of the time, the first thing you get called, depending on how your situation went down, is a hook. The second thing that I want to get across, going off of what I just mentioned, I created this series to help men to access their deeper feelings so that they can communicate with women at the level the women need to be communicated at while still being a man. Right. And that's the thing. You don't have to cry and you don't have to whine. You don't have to do all those things. There's a saying that goes that 90% of life is just showing up. And if you're there, you're listening, you're not thinking about your fantasy football league or other things you have to do with work, you're actually there with the person. It doesn't matter if it's your wife. I mean, this works on your kids, anybody, but just being there and listening. And I know I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert, fights every day, stuff like that, working on cars, where men were men. I never saw my dad cry. I never saw my grandfather cry. I never saw my other grandfather cry. So I had the same belief. So I'm no different than you are. The only difference is I was going to challenge my fears of not looking like a man. What I realized is relationships where I stopped trying to be cool and manly were the ones in which girls connected with me more. So this is going to help you out in your next relationships, is following along. I mean, it doesn't have to be just watching my videos. Like I said, there's not a lot out there from men, but mine are going to really show you how somebody, because I've lived through all these and I've created this because of the challenges that I've gone through and wanting to be zig where other people zag. And the third thing, I said that the first one is the most important. They're equally important, but if you don't believe in the first premise, then you're not even going to be reading the second or the third.
Right.
But becoming friends with your ex, that's invaluable. You got divorced, you separated because at your core, you had differences. You had different beliefs. You came together thinking you had the same beliefs, but that's what happens in relationships as it goes on. You learn about yourself, you learn about each other. Your parents taught you that you argued with them about, you start to see that you agree with them, and you may have married somebody because they're opposite from your parents. When I'm saying becoming friends, it doesn't mean that just being amicable. You're not enemy. When you can put out positive vibes towards your ex, and the reason I wrote this for parents and doing these videos for fathers, it's because I don't really care if two people that don't have kids get divorced, because the way that I look at things is that every relationship you're in, what the universe wants you to learn about yourself to help you grow, whether it's in this world or the next. If you get divorced from a woman, you don't have children, they want you to learn from that particular relationship, and then you move on to the next. So if you don't ever want to talk to her again, that's really up to you. But what the universe is telling you when you have a child together is that you need to learn something from your ex, because they're tethering you together for the rest of your children's lives for your learning. Otherwise, the universe wouldn't have set you up together. You wouldn't have had kids together. What happens is when you can put out these positive vibes to your ex, that it helps your kids, because what they're doing is, and this is something I talk a lot in my videos, is you're modeling. You're modeling not just when you're married for your kids, what a healthy relationship looks like. You're modeling your divorce, what a healthy relationship looks like. Because if you aren't able to repair things with your ex, be on speaking terms and things of that nature, you're not putting out, I hope something happens to her. I hope her plane crashes when she travels next. Because your kids vibrate at a much higher level than adults do. And so they can feel these things. Even if you're not saying anything, they can feel what's going on. And the last thing to say about this, to try to give you some context, remember something about your children's mother. So for 9 months, your wife, your children in her womb, and then the average breastfeeding that American women do after the child is born is around 15 months. Let's just say it's 6 months, okay? Close to a year and a half, hormonal connection to their mother that men will never have. My point is, understanding that your kids are that connected to their mom, regardless of whether they fight with her every day or not, that's a connection that can't be undone. When you are putting out negative energy or angry energy towards their mother, they're going to feel weird inside. It's going to make them uncomfortable. And subconsciously, they're going to be judging you, even if their mother was the one who, in the physical world, did more things to destroy the marriage.
It boils down to the importance is for your children. If you don't have children, there's no need to be friendly or even acknowledge the existence of your ex. But children being a factor, it's incredibly important. Now, I know for myself, I struggle with this. I am not mean to her per se, but I don't really communicate with her only via the app that we use. I struggle with it. So, and that's another reason why I wanted to have you on, because I can learn something from you. So what steps could I take, and other men out there that are struggling with this as well, what steps can they take to improve that relationship, or at least improve their thoughts about the relationship in order to start moving forward to a place where they're very amicable, we'll say?
That's why my video series does. It goes step by step. There's no silver bullet for it. We're talking emotional yardstick. Everyone's is different. And so for me, easier than most men, because I never had the connection to Julie. We were never connected. It was more of when we met at the company, I was the golden boy and she was the wild child. And she was interested in me because of I was loyal, dependable, honest, and hardworking, just what it looked like the perfect man would be. However, I was missing the emotional connectivity that was number one for her, but she didn't realize. You don't realize these things until you're actually in the relationship And then when the arguments start, and speaking of that, one of the things I talk about in the video series is called unbuilding the foundation. Before you unbuild your foundation, you have to untangle you from your former wife. You have to find out where you end and she begins and vice versa. And so once you untangle that and see, okay, in my situation, it was money. I came from a very black and white family in terms of never spent more than you have in the bank. You know, what they considered use your money wisely. So I was a saver, an investor, and all those things. I kept things pretty tight. And she came from a family where it was live for the day. You can always make money, but you never know what tomorrow brings. So eat dessert first, that sort of thing. So she was the exact extreme from me. And one of the great things about our relationship was the things that I took from her to move me into the middle. So now I can go out. And one of the things I talk about in one of my videos is I never had a professional massage before I met her. And she took me out for and this was crazy too. We barely knew each other. We just started dating probably 2 or 3 months. She took me out to the nicest spas in the Palm Desert. So I was like, what? And my parents never had a massage, a professional massage. It made me get more in touch with myself, and then also learned that I don't have to live a tight life. When you're tight with money, it transfers over to being tight with your love, because it's the fear. So my fear was, what if I couldn't make rent? What if I didn't have the money? The fear in a relationship would be, what if I show myself and I get rejected? But getting back to your question, the first thing you can do, look at the reasons why you're angry with your wife and the things that happened, the things that you think are, the most evil, foul, and then look at them from her perspective. So let's say she was the shopaholic. Okay. And that runs against everything you believe in. And you're like, I can't believe this. We don't have this money. And she's going out and she's buying things. She's bought 7 of the same necklaces. I don't understand. Why is she doing this? Why is she trying to destroy our family? So you take a step back, you put your ego in check, and you think, okay, how did she get to this point? This is not something that she consciously chose to do. She's not consciously looking to hurt you. She wouldn't be with you in the first place. She didn't choose you out of a crowd and say, I'm going to fuck this guy's life up. And say, okay, look at her background. Maybe her parents never let her have anything. Maybe the way they showed love to her was by giving her things. And maybe they never physically showed her love. Maybe she didn't feel that connection. You just have to look back, and you have to look. This is cyclical. And this is what my videos are all about, is breaking the cycle. So whatever she did to you, what you see her doing to you, happened to her probably tenfold, and it probably happened to her parents, either one of them, tenfold. And this is what I talk about, taking the high road, being the quote unquote bigger person, being the first to break the cycle and say, you know what? I'm going to accept my former wife for who she is. She did these things, but she wasn't doing them on purpose. She was doing the best she could with the tools that she had available to her that she got from her parents. What you look at is, how can I, because you don't have control over her. You don't have any control over her. You never did. And you can look at yourself and say, here are some of the things I'd like to give to my kids. Their mother isn't able to give to them. Not that she's purposely not. She just never had that. Just like Julie, her mother, even though she had a mom until she was 10, her mother was checked out. She wasn't there. She's the middle of 3 children, same as me. And she ran the household. She, with her dad, when she lived with her, she lived with her dad and her older sister and younger brother. She got them up to take the showers in the morning, just threw all the dishes in the sink. And I think once a week they had a cleaning lady come take care of it. I grew up in a household where my mom taught me how to clean, taught me how to do those things. So that's why I didn't like having house cleaners and stuff, because when I grew up in the typical situation, the nuclear family, and my dad went out to work. I didn't see him all day, came home around 5 at night, then went into his home office and did more work after we threw the ball around. My mom, she did everything else. So my dad, brought home the paycheck, but he got to live in this fantasy world that doesn't exist anymore. Well, not so much. He got to go and didn't have to deal with all the tough stuff, is what happens at home, dealing with the kids and things like that. Going off to work where he loved doing what he did. I mean, there's so many different layers you can look at here. But first thing is, take the stuff that's the toughest, that you find the toughest about her, and then find out where that came from, and then try empathy with her, and that'll help you.
No, I completely agree. Just thinking about the things that she did and her story, and it lines up, and I never really kind of thought of it. I mean, it's not exact, but there's enough similarities there that it makes you understand that it didn't come out of nowhere, so to speak. It came from experience and history and modeling, like you said earlier. So a great way to look at it. I honestly never considered it.
Something you and I talked about earlier, the sixth sense effect, is something that I coined in my book and then put into one of my earlier videos. I think the video is called, or at least on the thumbnail, You Missed the Signs. This is a spoiler alert if you haven't seen The Sixth Sense. If you haven't, go pause this and go watch it. In The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis, the main character of the film, he gets killed at the beginning. He has no idea that he's dead. At the end, he goes back and he looks and he realizes that the clues were there all along. That's the same thing in a relationship.
Yeah.
And this starts the second you meet the person. You don't even have to have been dating them. And one of the things with Julie is I got to watch her with all of her boyfriends before we started dating. And I saw how she was and how, we'll get bored easily and things like that. And that's why the 50-50 thing is I put a blind eye to it because I was so focused on the result of wanting to have her as my wife. All I was ever waiting for her was to tell me when she wanted that engagement ring. And I was out. I already knew where I was getting it from and everything like that.
Right.
But with the sixth sense effect, it's if you look back to the beginning of meeting the person, take it to where you are when things ended, you will see all the signs there. And a lot of the times it's a passive aggressive thing that your wife says. If you just blow it off, you'll notice that anything you blew off came back to haunt you later on because she was telling you. And the passive aggressive is a way that somebody who doesn't know how to say something at the conscious level says what they're truly feeling. And I know, and when I went back and looked, there were so many clues. I almost felt silly. Then I went back to my belief. That's what the universe wanted me in this relationship. They wanted me to have these 3 kids, wanted me to learn from her. And here's another thing when you talk about something that you can start right away and try to have an amicable relationship is understand that unless you hate your kids, you would not have those kids and those personalities and the things that you love about them without your wife. The question you can ask yourself is, would you rather have never been with her and not had any of that pain and any of the stuff you're dealing with right now, and then you give the kids back? You'd rather do that. So if your answer is no, you won't give the kids back, that's where when people say nut up or shut up, that's where I would say be a man. You want the kid, you get what comes with it. You get all of it.
Yeah, it's a package deal. 100% agree with all these points. I struggle with this in general in life. There's 2 sides to me, and I think there's 2 sides to all of us, I think. But for men in particular, I think there's a very logical side, and there's an emotional side. The emotional side tends to be underdeveloped. We're not very good. Emotion, like a toddler, and throw a fit, and I'm not dealing with it. But it is not an easy thing, but I do think it is the path forward. And I think some of your tips are fantastic. Are there any additional thoughts besides what you covered already that you'd like to share with my audience?
Yeah. See, if you have a good foundation of understanding of where you're building from, if you're just parachuting into this and trying to have an amicable relationship, you're going to get stuck in a tree. It's all about baby steps and understanding that not comparing yourself to anybody else. And one of the things about having a degree in spiritual psychology is I spent those 2 years rethinking the way I looked at everything. But like I said, I was, come from very black and white upbringing. And so my parents, they're not people that really believe in things you can't touch, smell, taste, hear. And the spiritual world is all about the exact opposite. I'm also found out later in life that I'm an intuitive, clairvoyant, and empath. So I'm super sensitive to energy. And my entire life, I didn't know why that was happening. So someone like me, obviously, I'm more in tune than a lot of people that being an intuitive. So I can feel when something that I just said didn't land right. So maybe more difficult for other people. But the thing is, so don't compare yourself to anybody else. Remember, this is very much baby steps. It's like anything. If you're 600 pounds, you're not going to go out and run a marathon on day 1. People will tell you, your first thing is, I want you to walk from the bed to the bathroom. And then the next day, you're going to walk to the kitchen and slowly you'll do it. And then next thing you know, this is the same thing. You're working muscles and muscle memory. The more you practice compassion and empathy towards your former wife, and I know it's tough because when especially when it's so fresh and raw, but look at your kids. And this is, again, in my video series, you're going to take note of each thing that your kids are teaching you and the things that you love about each child. And you're going to see this in one of my videos. You're going to thank your wife, whether you do it in person or you type it up and you never send it, but you're going to thank your wife for being there to create these kids with you. Just go watch the video series and take it one step at a time.
I agree, Andrew. And it is a great video series. I definitely recommend all you guys to check it out. But thanks for coming on today, Andrew. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll come back and we can do this again.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to.
Thanks again. And I'll see you next time.